Welcome back. One of the important things to know when using libraries is that they're constantly evolving. And what worked, let's say, a year ago, will still work this year too, but you might have upgrades in libraries such as ESLint and Webpack. Maybe we'll have Webpack 5 and Webpack 6 in the future. And these are constantly changing. Now, most of the time, when you build something, it's going to work if your versions match. But if you start upgrading things, you might have conflicts and dependencies that kind of break. Now, since the last video, there's been a few changes, very minor ones though. So I want to show you how those changes look so that you're ready for web development this year. And there's two main changes that I want to talk about. The first one is Babel that we installed in the last video. And we ran a command that looks something like this. We did npm install --save deb, Babel core, Babel loader, Babel preset env, and then we also did Babel preset stage 2. Now, Babel 7 has just come out. And in Babel 7, they've actually removed some packages. Things like Babel presets stage 2 is deprecated. Instead, we can run and install different packages that are updated. And I'll explain why these updates were made in just a few seconds. So all we would need to do is do @Babel, and we install core, which is what Babel core used to be. Then we have @Babel preset env, and then finally Babel, let's say preset React if we wanted to use React in this project, and then finally Babel loader. So we've removed the stage presets that we talked about in Babel, and they've been deprecated. Instead, we just use preset env, which automatically detects what the Babel compiler should do based on the environment. Remember, Babel compiler simply takes your new JavaScript syntax and converts it into something that a browser can understand. And the stages were ways to use really new JavaScript syntax that hasn't even been implemented officially in ECMAScript. But in case you wanted to use it, you could do that. Now, the problem with that is that you have all these code bases that are using non-standard JavaScript syntaxes. And it really fragments the community. So they've decided to remove it so that if you install Babel this way, and we got to make sure we spell that right with a P in here. So now, unlike the last video, in order to have Babel being used, all we need to do is simply have our presets. And instead of having the stages, now all we have is Babel env, and finally preset React. So no more stages there, which is nice. And you see here the deprecations that have happened. And you can take a look at the migration page over here to see why those changes were made if you want to get a little bit more detail. But if you still want to use those experimental features, such as, let's say, stage 2, you have to manually install each of the packages as to what you want. And you can see over here, let's say if you want to use decorators, you have to install this Babel package individually. All right, let's take a look at the next change. And this is another small one. The other one is ESLint. When we installed ESLint, we simply said npm install --save dev ESLint, so that we have linters working. Oh, and make sure I add a comma here. Now, once we installed ESLint, let me clear this. We created an ESLint RC file. And it had a dot. So it was a dot file. Now, this way of creating an ESLint file is actually deprecated. I mean, you can still use it if you want, but the recommended way now is to create either a JSON or a JavaScript file, a JSON file, YAML file. If we go to their documentation here, we'll see that these are all the file types that are supported, and the ESLint RC file is deprecated. So we have to specify the extension. In our case, we can just use the JSON extension, and the way that we set up ESLint RC in the previous video would work just the same. So just a minor change, but just so you know, we just need an extension with the ESLint RC file. And that's it. That wasn't too bad, was it? Just something to keep in mind as libraries change. Things sometimes might differ and you might have to update, but they usually provide some pretty good documentation on how to upgrade them. And as the community evolves, as the industry evolves, you should expect to see these changes. And getting good at reading this documentation to see how to upgrade things will come in very handy as a senior developer.